welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well out there. And today we're going to head back to Haddonfield, Illinois. But before we do that, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Join me here. I greatly would appreciate that. Also, my shameless plug for my TeePublic page. Go over there. The link will be down below in the description. Check that out. We have 59 designs over there. Check it out. If you're not interested, that's cool too. And today we're going to talk about Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now, the first Halloween was a landmark horror film that was very successful and for a very long time was the most successful independent horror film of all time until the Blair Witch Project. The sequel, Halloween 2, was very successful as well. Not as successful as the first one, but very successful. And then in 82, they threw us a curveball. Well, I was too young to see it at the time, but they gave the movie-going public and horror fans Halloween 3 Season of the Witch in 82. It made a little bit of money, but it wasn't very well received. And, I love that film now. And now it's starting to gain traction amongst the horror community. But back then it was lambasted and kind of forgotten and ignored after its theatrical release. So the Halloween franchise was dormant until this came out for 6 years. This one came out on October 21st of 1988. Had a budget of $5 million, and upon release it made 17.7. And it's rated R. It's an hour and 28 minutes long. Now, this movie, Mustafa Akkad, his whole goal was to take the series back to basics. He gave Carpenter and Hill a shot to do Halloween 3. Tommy Lee Wallace directed that film. It didn't work, at least they thought it was a good film. It just never should have been called Halloween 3, which I know has been an argument online for many, many years. But once Hill and Carpenter gave up their rights to it and sold their rights off to Akkad, he was able to take the franchise back to basics, as he liked to describe it if you ever seen interviews with the man. Now, to direct this film, none other than Dwight Little came in. He'd done a few projects before this, but this was his first big break. After this, though, he would go on to do some action films and another horror film. Matter of fact, right after this, he would go on to do Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund. And then he would go on to work with Steven Seagal on Marked for Death. He did work with Brandon Lee on Rapid Fire, which is a pretty kick-ass action film. He did Murder of 1600 in the 90s with Wesley Snipes. And he's still directing to this day. Does a lot of TV. He did a few movies. I think he did Anaconda 2, The Blood Orchid. And he's still working in TV to this day. Now, Alan B. McElroy wrote this script. Him and Dwight Little were friends. And he wrote the script in 11 days. There was a writer's strike looming, and he had a rush to get the script finished so they can get off to Salt Lake City where they filmed this one to get the movie rolling before the strike hit. Now, Alan B. McElroy would return to horror with Wrong Turn, the original Wrong Turn. Then he would come back in 2021 for the remake or reboot of Wrong Turn, if you've ever seen that. He wrote that as well. And cast-wise, we have the ever-loyal, ever-present Donald Pleasance back as Dr. Samuel Loomis. Our new cast here is Ellie Cornell, plays Rachel. The great Danielle Harris, who's a horror favorite, and this was her first big film, plays Jamie Lloyd, Rachel's adopted stepsister. George Wilbur plays the Shape, or Michael Myers, and this was his first crack at it. He would come back to play Michael Myers again in Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And I've always liked George Wilbur's portrayal. His portrayal is not the issue here, and we'll get into that when we get to the negatives. This film opens up. Dwight Little did a lot of research into harvest season and autumn, and you see that being in this film with the opening shots, the establishing shots of a farm, farming equipment, some old school Halloween decorations from the 80s. And then we get into our film. Michael Myers, it's a rainy night, and this ambulance is, per the law, as they say, is going to transfer Michael Myers to a different facility. He's been in a coma, we find out, since Halloween 2 when Loomis blew them both up, and they go over that. They give you a reason why Michael's still alive and Loomis. They give you the answer to the question, and they move on with it. They don't dwell on it because, as you know, if you thought about it too much, there's no way Loomis would be alive. Michael, maybe, because at this point he's supernatural, but there's no way Loomis lived. But we're glad he's back because we love Donald Pleasance in this role. And Michael's in the ambulance, and the doctors that are transporting him in the back with him make mention that he has a niece living in his hometown. Michael kills both of them, and he's on the loose and is on his way back to Haddonfield. This is when we're introduced to we're introduced to Jamie Lloyd and Rachel. And Jamie's having dreams about Michael, actually, even though she's never seen him. Although the town definitely has not forgotten what happened 10 years earlier, because it comes up several times throughout the film, which we'll get into because Carpenter did write a script for a fourth film. We'll get into that and what that had to do with the franchise and why it got rejected by the powers that be. And pretty soon, Loomis is on Michael's trail and he catches him at a gas station where Michael killed a bunch of people. He gets away in a fiery explosion. Loomis follows suit, and Michael's back in Haddonfield. And this time, Michael is more methodical about how he's going to conduct his business in Haddonfield. He finds out where Jamie lives. He confirms it's her by looking at photos once Jamie leaves with Rachel to go trick or treating. Then he takes out the power, takes out the police station. So Michael has thought this out and actually is being very smart about the way he's going to conduct this. And we get some really wonderful set pieces. And Michael's definitely off the chain here, although part two is probably a little gorier, but they do bring the gore when some of the kills do happen. There's some cool kills in this as well. And there's a mob, there's a bunch of men going around trying to find Michael, and they make mention that the one guy lost his son 10 years earlier when Michael did his first rampage. They don't say what his son's name was, but they do reference it. And pretty much the main set piece is in the sheriff's house, Sheriff Meeker's house. And it's a really well done sequence of cat and mouse. You see Michael in the shadows as as characters are talking and having a conversation. And then we get some cool kills. Kelly Meeker getting killed with the shotgun up through her. Brady getting his throat snapped and his thumb up into his jawline. I love that scene. It's awesome. We get the rooftop scene, which Ellie Cornell actually did get hurt to have to go to the hospital because a nail cut up her stomach when her and Daniel Harris were climbing on the roof that was built on a soundstage. And then the finale in the school, and then with Rachel driving the pickup truck and them shooting him dozens and dozens of times, and Michael falling in this well. And then we get that ending that we knew they were never going to have the balls to stick with, where Jamie, because she touched Michael, the evil has transferred into Jamie, which there was a plan for the fifth one where Jamie would take up the mantle. But again, like I said, there was no way they were going to have the balls to do that, to have a kid killing people. Stabs her stepmother, her adopted mother, and then Loomis is screaming as he's pointing a gun at her, "No, no," as she's standing at the top of the steps holding the bloody scissors in the clown costume that Michael wore in the original film, well, similar to the one Michael wore in the original film when he killed his sister. And that's the end of Halloween 4. What to like about this film? Well, the cast. Ellie Cornell is great as Rachel, and I love her character. She really does go through a metamorphosis through this film. She grows as a character. First, she's kind of selfish, and she's worried about going out with Brady on this date, especially when her parents tell her they need her to babysit Jamie on Halloween night because their babysitter broke her leg and she's going to be unable to watch Jamie. But you really see her becoming a sister to Jamie throughout the film and caring about her well-being and worried about her. And I do really love Ellie Cornell's performance here. And she's on the screen. Her and Danielle Harris are on the screen through 3/4 of the movie, really. I mean, Loomis is there and he's great. Donald Pleasance is great as always. But it's really their movie, Rachel and Jamie's movie. And Danielle Harris was up to the task. For being her first film and being such a young age, she really does give a great performance here in this film. And the film definitely benefits from the performances. Even some of the side characters, the guy who plays Brady, Kelly Meeker, I can't remember her name at the moment, but she's gone on to do other stuff. Even, Wade, when he goes up to proposition Kelly to go out with her and she tells him to fuck off Wade. I mean, it's a great moment. They give all these side characters a little moment so you get to know them. Sheriff Meeker, we get to know him and how he functions as a sheriff and how he sees law enforcement. Even though we don't spend a ton of time with these characters, you get enough where you get enough characterization where you kind of like these characters. Yeah, Kelly's kind of goes behind Rachel's back to get Brady, but I still don't want to see her get killed. I don't think she's a bad person per se. And I think Brady, is a decent guy, although he does something very shitty to Rachel. So each character gets their moment, even though they're not the main character. But the movie does definitely rest on the capable shoulders of Ellie Cornell and Danielle Harris. I don't know why Ellie Cornell did not become a bigger actress after this film. I know they kind of screwed her in part 5, unceremoniously killing her 20 minutes in. And I've reviewed that film. You can check it out on my Halloween playlist. There's a lot of issues with that film. This film is way superior to part 5. So besides that, I think George Wilbur gives a great performance as Michael. And we'll get into the negatives of not him, his performance, but the mask, which has been an issue ever since this film going forward until part 6, where I think they actually got it right or close to right. The kills are pretty damn good. The shotgun kill, we get the kill where the the guy who owns the bar gets his head ripped back from Michael when he smashes his window. That's an awesome kill. The Brady kill. Some of it's done with just simple techniques, but they're really well done and they're very impactful. The doctor being with the thumb in the forehead, although all that was George Wilbur going like that and I'm pumping blood, but it works. It's very effective. Um, Obviously for Michael to get out, there has to be a transfer. And they reused that logic in Halloween 2018 because how the hell are you going to get him out of this maximum security hospital? So we can forgive some of that stuff. There are some continuality errors that have become a legend at this point. We'll go over those in a second because we're still in the positives. I think Dwight Little does a really nice job at the directing. I think part two is really well done, and that's because they had a lot of the same crew as Carpenter had in the first one, especially with Dean Cundy coming back. I think Dwight Little does a really good job of trying to keep this in Carpenter's ball. It looks great. He does a great job with the suspense parts and building suspense and giving us those Michael Myers moments and giving Loomis a chance to shine. So all that, I think it's pretty decently well written as well by Alan B. McElroy, even though it was a rushed script. So overall, this is a very, very solid Halloween sequel, especially for a fourth film. And I think the benefit of that the franchise went away for 6 years and then they got an opportunity to bring it back. So I think that definitely helped this film out immensely. So let's get into the negatives. I think the continuality errors hurt it, and why they didn't go back to reshoot some really glaring problems, I'll never know. The most famous one is when Jamie and Loomis are in the school. Michael pops out and grabs Loomis, throws him through a door into a classroom, and he has white hair. I don't know how that gets so fucked up and how nobody caught it. And even Dwight Little said, yeah, we just didn't notice. How does nobody notice that the hair is wrong? Besides the fact that the mask in this movie looks like shit. I mean, it really does. I mean, Don Post Studios did the mask for this one as well, and it doesn't look great. It's not a great mask. I mean, 4 and 5, both masks are not great, and this one's just, it looks like a cheap knockoff version of the original mask. It really does. It looks like, that's what it looks like, a cheap knockoff version. I know people say, well, you got it in the drugstore, so it wouldn't be the exact. Yeah, but we want to see the same mask. If we're going to keep the character going, we want to see the same freaking mask. And they never could get it right. 6 was the one where the mask was pretty goddamn good. Then H2O, that mask is a huge dumpster fire throughout that film. Resurrection wasn't great. And really, until Rob Zombie came around to do his 2 films, did the mask actually look really good. And then David Gordon Green's 3 films, the mask looked really, really good, thanks to Christopher Nelson. But in this film, the mask really does detract from Michael. I think Michael's pretty creepy here. They do a lot of shots of Michael standing in the background. I love all that. Him just being omnipresent throughout. If you look at the frame in the corners, you see him somewhere hanging out, watching the proceedings. I think that's cool. But the continuality errors really hurt it in certain parts. I think the ending, while I really like it, they had to have known they were never going to have the balls to stick with it. And then this goes into part 5 problems. The whole how they explain it and why Jimmy doesn't talk in the 5th one is complete horseshit. I never liked that story point. Overall, though, I mean, I really do like this film. It's a very solid, and rewatching it last night, this movie holds up extremely well. It's definitely, and Alan Howarth came in to do the score. He had worked with Carpenter on the 2nd film on the score and the 3rd film on the score. So he was, a veteran of the franchise by this point. But I do like Halloween 4. I don't think it's perfect. It's not as good as the first 2 films, but I think it's a very solid sequel in this franchise. Now, Carpenter, this is funny, the Cannon Film Group actually wanted to make Halloween 4, and they approached Deborah Hill and John Carpenter because this is when they still had skin in the game. They had part of the rights. And Carpenter and Hill wrote a script. It was much more psychological and much more ghostly, kind of. It was more about how the events of the first 2 films affected the town of Haddonfield. Now, they have explored that through some of the sequels. Part 6 explored that a little bit, where Haddonfield banned Halloween, and the kids were trying to get it back. And then in Halloween Ends, they explored that even a little bit more, how the events of Michael have influenced the town. But that was going to be the whole movie for part 4. The Cannon Group didn't like it, so they said no thanks. Carpenter and Hill realized everybody just wanted to bring Michael Myers back, which Carpenter was not interested in. So Carpenter and Hill sold the rights back, or sold the rights off to Mustafa Akkad, and that's when he decided to bring it back to basics. And this is the direction they went. If you ever see interviews of Carpenter, he said, even on part 2, he didn't know what to write. It was like, I told the story, it's over, and then they did what they did, and I got to check every time to make a sequel, so I don't care. Carpenter said that many times over the years until the David Gordon Green trilogy, where he actually came back and did the score in that. This film actually was shot in Salt Lake City, Utah. They shot 4, 5, and 6 in Salt Lake City, Utah. And really, you can't, it looks good. I mean, the landscape shots in that, I like all that. So it definitely captures the mood of autumn. I think Dwight Little does a really good job with that. The Vincent drugstore that you see Jamie and Rachel go in for Jamie to find a costume was in The Sandlot years later when The Sandlot was shot, 5 years later. And it's appeared in other films too that were shot in Salt Lake City. But yeah, it showed up in The Sandlot if you've ever seen that film. In 1988, Halloween 4 came out, Nightmare on Elm Street 4 came out, Friday the 13th Part 7 came out, and the original Child's Play came out. What a year for horror that was. My goodness, I was too young to go to the movies then, but what a hell of a year for horror that was, especially with Michael Myers coming back to the big screen for the first time in 6 years. At the end of the day, I like this film. It's a very solid Halloween film. It's one I've watched many times over the years. I have that steel box from Anchor Bay back in the day, but this was one of the first VHS tapes I ever bought. There was a video store going out of business in hometown Pennsylvania, 2 miles up the road from where I grew up. And I bought 4 and I bought 5 in Salem's Lot in the old big plastic clam case, which I wish I still had, but I don't, unfortunately. And I used to watch the shit out of this movie, and it's definitely a very solid entry in the franchise. So at the end of the day, I would give Halloween 4 an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 for Halloween 4. What would you rank this one, or what would you rate this one? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Share this video, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate that. I have a lot of people that watch these videos that aren't subscribed. Please hit the subscribe button. It's free. And until next time, bye.